7, 8, 9, 10. This is Chad Barron. You're listening to My Alien Life.
Over the years, as I was growing up, there were always these strange little things that would happen. A phone ringing for no reason. There was one time that I came home. I must have been maybe 11 years old, give or take, and I had this big knife. And I was sharpening it on my desk. I was the only one home. And the phone rings. I go out to answer the phone. I pick it up, and I just get a dial tone. I come back into my bedroom. Everything is still there except for the knife. And it was just gone.
Alcatraz is the most infamous prison in the world. Evil spirits, unknown beasts, vicious murderers, and an untold number of ghosts are all said to reside in this tiny island in San Francisco Bay. Tonight, authors Brian Clune and Bob Davis are here to talk about haunted Alcatraz and their lives as real ghost hunters. That and more is coming right up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brower. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
My guests tonight have authored a bunch of books together and with other people, and have also been involved in just about everything paranormal for most of their lives. These guys have been on radio, TV, podcast, and tonight we're answering your automotive questions live. And I'd like to welcome Brian Clune and Bob Davis. Welcome to My Alien Life, the podcast, gentlemen.
You need to lean that out a little bit on the cart.
It's a 396 Hemi,
You need to
so
lean it out
it's
on
one of
the
those
cart.
things that just... Hey, you said automotive.
I'm sure our listeners have automotive questions, but Bob, I'm sure they would much rather hear about Planet Paranormal. Tell us about that, please.
Basically, it's how Planet Paranormal started out. It didn't start out like it is now. We're about 15 years old now, and when we had the opportunity to buy Planet Paranormal, because it was coming up for sale. Well, it wasn't really going up for sale. It's just the person who created it decided they were going to move on to do other things. And when I heard that, I called Brian and also our original co-founder, who's Ash Blackwell, who passed away several years back now. And so we all talked about it and said, hey, what do you guys think? Should we buy it and try to make a go of it? And so we started out with hosting a bunch of podcasts. We still have Chris Swimming show on there. We had Taps Para Radio, all the big shows. So I think we had about 54 at the max shows on that site. And then slowly we just expanded to more likely things. Like we thought, okay, we've got Planet Paranormal, the name's big, let's add investigating and stuff, because I'd been investigating a long time, and so had Brian, and so that was our natural next step, and we just kind of kept adding on. What's that?
I was going to say, it seems like all of us have been investigating for quite a while at that point, but I think Bob's been doing it basically his whole life, where rest of us kind of came about a lot later. Bob's been doing it literally since he was like 13 years old.
Well, that's the thing about this book, and that's why when I just happened to stumble back across your message, because they kind of get lost. I get, and so
when you said that book, you're talking about
I'm talking about Ghosts and Legends of Alcatraz,
and that's kind of our topic tonight. We're going to talk about haunted Alcatraz and the San Francisco area, Bay Area in general, which is just live with all. Yeah, they didn't exactly put the normal in paranormal. It's a different kind of world over there.
No, yeah,
it really is.
I can't
it's
even
a beautiful
hardly
world.
Walk around there at certain times, without being just almost totally overwhelmed. But until I had gone to take the Alcatraz tour when I was 13, I was a complete agnostic, non-believer in anything spiritual at all. In fact, if you said you believed in ghosts to me, I would, very arrogantly laugh in your face, which was really not my, personality type. But it struck me so funny that people could believe in ghosts. And then we went to Alcatraz, and Alcatraz is literally what started me on this long.
So what happened at Alcatraz that kind of threw you into that realm?
You want to go in there right now? So, okay, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. But I went with my mom, dad, brother, sister-in-law, and we just decided to take the day tour. And so we were going through, and when we got to D block, we got down to the end of cell 14D. And D block is like maximum security. And I think it's the last 5 cells are, totally maximum. So it's like when you're in there and everything's shut, there's not a bit of light in there. There's no furniture. There's no toilet. There's just a hole in the ground. And it's freezing cold. I mean, you can't even imagine. So the park ranger asked if anybody volunteered to go in and see what it was like for the prisoners to be in there, because some of them would be in there for months on end and naked sometimes. And so, excuse my voice, folks. I'm getting over pneumonia, as probably most of you know. But anyway, so I volunteered because I didn't even know the place was supposed to be haunted or anything like that. And so he puts me back in the back left corner, and I'm standing there, and he leaves, and he shuts the inner door. There's 2 doors. He shuts the inner door and then the outer door, and then it's just pitch black. And then he yells in. He goes, "You doing okay in there?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And just as soon as I said, "Yeah, I'm fine," I get this big, really hard, grab on my shoulder where you could hear it. I don't know if you could hear it on the air, and at the same time, right after you get that grab, a voice goes in my ear. He goes, "You're mine." And my voice is good for that right now. So it was just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're a 13-year-old that doesn't believe in, the Lord above or anything else, it changed my whole life completely. And, so I joke, but I'm not really joking. I went in, an agnostic, and I came out a Christian, and basically that's the way it's been my whole life. And I've been studying and researching, trying to figure out what the heck could cause that, natural things, and also paranormal things. And to this day, I have come up with no, reasonable, thing that it could be other than paranormal, because the walls are just so thick. There's no way that anybody could, nobody could get in there. So, and even if they yelled, you would hear that they're yelling, I think. But, you couldn't even hear the crowd outside, really, except for when the ranger yelled in. So it really changed my life. And I didn't tell anybody what happened, even though people kept asking, until I was probably in my late 20s. I finally admitted to my dad, that I'd had that experience, and that's what happened. And then my dad admitted to me he had a similar experience somewhere else, and he didn't believe either.
And I want to remind everybody we're talking to Bob Davis and Brian Clune, and I want to ask Brian, how did you get your start? Where did you first become interested in the paranormal?
Well, I actually grew up with what we believe was my father in the house. He passed away when I was just turning 3 years old. And over the years, as I was growing up, there were always these strange little things that would happen. A phone ringing for no reason. There was one time that I came home. I must have been maybe 11 years old, give or take, and I had this big knife. And I was sharpening it on my desk. I was the only one home. And the phone rings. I go out to answer the phone. I pick it up, and I just get a dial tone. I come back into my bedroom. Everything is still there except for the knife. And it was just gone. And even to this day, we've never found it, nowhere in the house, outside, anywhere. So over the years, we just sort of began to realize that my father was kind of hanging around waiting for my mother to pass. And since she passed away in 87, there was no more activity within the house whatsoever. And that kind of clinched it that, okay, it was my father just, waiting for my mom, and they went on together. Then when my oldest son turned 18, him and I kind of were drifting apart a little bit. And I was looking for something to do with him so we could kind of reconnect. And I asked him, I said, is there something we can do? And he suggested we go ghost hunting. And I was kind of like, are you kidding me? And he convinced me by, we used to watch the world's creepiest destinations and things like that. And we would laugh at the people getting scared. So he told me, we should try that ourselves and see how we do. So we found the group that Bob was already affiliated with, and we both joined. He backed out. I stayed with it, and the rest is history.
Very cool. So when you two got together, what was did you have a plan there? Was it a mutual agreement that you were going to get something going, or what did that look like at that time?
Yeah, actually, I would say, in my opinion, it was because, Ash and I had been already, talking to each other. I met him and his wife on Facebook, and we met because we had two black cats that looked just the same, and they're these big furry black cats, and mine came from Transylvania, literally. And the lady had to go back to Transylvania and asked if I wanted a cat. And I'm like, a black cat from Transylvania? Heck yeah, I want it. So, it was, Ash kind of came on board, and you weren't on the team yet, were you, Brian? When we,
no,
I can't, no. Not yet, right?
Yeah, Ash and Laurel joined, I think, about 5-6 months before Carmel and I did.
And then, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was pretty close together, though. And then we met at a Starbucks, and Brian, hit it off with us real well, instantly. And so it was like, every time one of us would meet each other, we would just mesh like we were family. And we've been family ever since. And so it's, yeah.
We're not a team, we're a family.
Exactly.
So what was the first book you guys put together?
That would be California's Historic Haunts.
Well, yeah,
right?
We were actually kind of working. Well, yeah, no, it was California's Historic Haunts, and we were shopping that around to different publishers, and the History Press had actually called to turn down California's Historic Haunts, but as we were talking to the acquisitions editor, they were asking us about the Queen Mary and said, do you guys think you could write a book about the Queen Mary? And we're like, yeah, of course we can. And so they said, all right, well, we'll send you a contract. So he hung up, and it was about 15 minutes later, we look at the email, and Haunts had been sold to Schiffer. So it took about a year of trying to get a publisher, and within 15 minutes we got two with two different books, which was really cool.
Yeah, I was really surprised. So, yeah, I mean, the Queen Mary is basically my number one spot. Yeah. So, and then Alcatraz, I'd say, is number two. So when they said, can you write a book on the Queen Mary? It's like, yeah, I think we can handle it. So,
but up until that point, you hadn't had any work that you have done or that they were looking at. Did either one of you had a book at that point?
No.
Wow, that's that's amazing.
Discussed.
I do believe that. I think Bob had a couple. Didn't you have a couple stories that you had written for like a magazine or two, if I remember right?
Oh, I had stuff like that, and I've had books that I'd written but hadn't actually tried to get them published or anything. I've got a bunch of those still, but then we just kind of got sidetracked onto the direction that we seem to be led, and so that kind of led to the Queen Mary and the first book, California's Historic Haunts. That was like when I was coming back from my first experience on Alcatraz, and we got back on to, into San Francisco. One of the first places we walked by was a bookstore, and I stopped and I saw this book, and it was, I don't know what the title was exactly, but it was something like, California's most haunted places or something like that. And I asked my mom if I could go in and take a look at it. And she's like, why do you want to go look at a stupid book like that? And like, I just do, it's like, is it okay? And so she's, yeah, hurry it up. So I went in, I looked at it, and I came back out and I'm like, Mom, can I get it? And she's like, finally she gave in, relented. And the first thing I opened up to when I got back to the hotel was, it said cell 14D, and it showed a picture of cell 14D. I mean, I just cracked the book at random. And I was just like, okay, that can't be a coincidence, And so then I read the whole book front to back, overnight without stopping. And so then when we decided to do our book series, originally that's how we wanted to lay out a lot of the books was, different locations and what you could see, where you could stay, just all kinds of different things that would give people a lot of good information, history, of course, the hauntings. And so that's where that one came from. And then when we got the chance to do the Queen Mary book, we kind of shifted a little bit, but it still kind of has the same flavor. It still gives you the same information, just in a different context, I guess you'd say. I don't know.
We did a show last week, and it was about Eastern State Penitentiary. And one of the questions that I had asked was, what do you think it is with prisons in America that people have this fascination and this draw to prisons? I mean, of course, you guys are looking at it in a haunted way, but just prisons in general. What do you think causes people to search out and to find different prisons for tours? And I know we have one here in Montana, but Eastern State Penitentiary and then Alcatraz, of course, on each side of the nation. It's a good bookends for that kind of activity.
Absolutely. Brian?
Well, for me, I think it has to do with nobody wants to be in prison, okay? So I think we all have this fascination of, what would it be like to be in prison? And we go to the different prisons just to kind of get a taste of what it might be like, and in a way have us live something that some of us may want and others don't, but it gives us a brief glimpse into that darkness that's kind of in all of us. At least that's my own theory behind it. I could be completely wrong, but that's kind of how I always looked at it.
Well, and we can fantasize about it, and then we get to go home at the end of the day too, right?
Yeah, now
Exactly.
Charles Manson, he always said when he was in prison, he wasn't at home. So when Brian said nobody wants to be in prison, was thinking, except for one person, and he did. He seemed to want to be there, But I mean, most of the people, with half a mind, don't want to be anywhere near it. So, and then the way I kind of got into it was interesting because my father grew up, back in the, World War II days and stuff. And when he was a kid, they didn't have movies, movie theaters and stuff like that yet when he was little. So as what he would do for entertainment was he would go to famous murder trials and he would sit in the balcony or audience or whatever, and he'd listen to the trials, and he'd watch the trials. And it's crazy some of the trials that he would go to. And then he would take me and he would drive me around to, like whenever we were on vacation, and he'd show me where this murder happened, or it was very weird. but my dad was actually really a normal kind of guy and really funny, but it's just, that's all he had to do for entertainment. And so, he just kind of, it wore off on me. And so I guess that's where it started with me. And he was the first one to take me to Alcatraz. That was the first prison I'd ever been to. So,
well, and then there is the fact that this is a building that you just can't go in. I mean, if it's currently in operation and there's prisoners in there, you can't go in there. But once these things have closed down, allowing us access, it's a pretty neat place to visit.
Oh, you get a lot of activity, that's for sure, and a lot of really bizarre activities. So you got to have some fortitude about you, I would say. I wouldn't recommend people that are novices to go in, and just like book an investigation and go in and shoot in the dark, so to speak, because that's how you get in trouble. But definitely once you've got your experience, under your belt and stuff, they're great places to go. Hospitals, same thing. Just anywhere like that there's been a lot of death and crime and murder and stuff. So you're going to get a lot of activity.
I think it might have to do with human behavior as well, because people do like to visit abandoned mental institutions and whatever, like you said, hospitals. I mean, that's another draw as well, because things have happened in there that we normally don't get to see. And it's fascinating to finally get a glimpse into that, even if it's after the fact.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just going to say, it goes back to what I was saying before, where everybody wants to touch that little bit of a dark side that they know is within them, but be able to also pull back when needed. And I think that's the main reason for the fact that people do love going to prisons, asylums, mental wards. They're huge draws, especially for the paranormal community. And I mean, I can't think of any other reason other than the fact that, there is that within all of us.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It's somewhere in the back. I just didn't know it was in the back of me. But it was hiding out back there, and I, obviously did have a curiosity. I just didn't know it, early on. But
so just let's throw out a little bit of history of Alcatraz. When obviously in the turn of the century and late 1800s, you had this rock out there. You had this place which San Francisco's kind of unique in itself, whereas a lot of stories about travelers and sailors back in the day and people getting shanghaied and everything else. So when did Alcatraz start, and what was that piece of real estate like out there before the actual prison was put out there?
Well, Alcatraz was actually an island that the Ohlone Native American tribe, they used it as a fishing spot, but at the same time, they thought it was inhabited by evil spirits. So even though they would go out there and get onto the island and, rest while they were fishing, they would actually exile people from the tribe out there, figuring that they wouldn't last long because the evil spirits would take care of them. When the Spanish finally arrived, even though the Native Americans were afraid of the island, they were actually more afraid of the Spanish. So they went out there to hide from the Spanish themselves. When the Spanish finally completely took over, you have what is a legend called the Matacagme, which is sort of an offshoot of Bigfoot. So you have that associated with Alcatraz. And then when the Americans finally took over, they almost immediately turned it into a military fort. And that was around, I would say, 1850 something, give or take. And it's been basically a military fort all the way through until it became a federal prison. But then during World War II, the military again used it as a stockpile. So, it's pretty much been a military landmark since about the mid 1800s.
And a really long, varied history of there's places there you would never even, if you weren't allowed to be taken there or go there, which most people aren't, you'd freak out at what's underneath that place. They got dungeons and just horrible places that they used to keep people that, the worst of the worst. And so they don't show that very much, but so it's definitely been, well used for a lot of different sources.
So both of you were able to explore most of that island?
Pretty much all of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
We spent the night there, two nights, I guess it was. And
2 nights. It was
in
2010.
Yeah. And we were the only team out of, I don't know how many teams were out there, but it was a lot. And out of all the teams that were out there, we were the only team who didn't sleep all night. We just stayed up and investigated the whole time. And as you'd walk down cell block D, I think it was D that they were sleeping in the cells.
Yeah.
And you'd see most of them, like around 2:00, most of them had their flashlights hanging on the bars like little night lights, and everybody had already gone to sleep, most of them. We just were like, heck no, man, we don't know when we're going to get a chance to do this again. We're going to.
Yeah, it's like this is Alcatraz. We're not sleeping. But like Bob said, it was really funny. It was probably, like you said, about 2 or 3 in the morning, and we had to go back to where we were staying in the cell to get some batteries. And as we're walking through, you can hear people snoring, and the entire group, there were like 30 some odd people on the island, they were all paranormal investigators. And every single one of the cells had a nightlight. And I don't remember if it was Bob, Dave, but one of us goes, yeah, big bad ghost hunters. And just,
it was funny.
It was hilarious.
There's a lot of safety behind light.
Yeah.
Yes, there
is. There is, if it's the right light. But no, it just kind of struck us as funny. It's no disrespect to any of our colleagues or anything. They're all great friends. But it just kind of, hit us as funny. And, we just didn't want to waste time, while we had it.
I think the first year we were there, the day before we investigated Alcatraz, they had it set up so we investigated part of the Presidio. Then the next night was Alcatraz, and then we left the next morning after that. So I think we were up for about 45 hours, because once we got back to Ash and Laurel's, because they were living in Pleasanton at the time, none of us were could still sleep because all we wanted to do was go through the evidence. And then as we're going through the evidence, we start getting some of these amazing Class A EVPs, which just perked us up even more. And yeah, we were up for about 45 to 50 hours just.
So describe a Class A EVP for me.
One that
Bob,
that you can clearly, that like I could play for anybody and they would be able to, probably 99% of the people would be able to tell you at least basically, in context what it's saying, and be right, would be my opinion. I mean, they wouldn't have to be exactly right.
So not a lot of interpretation involved. It is what it is.
Exactly.
Right. You don't have to sit there and try to figure out, okay, is it saying this or that? Yeah.
So what's your device of choice when you're recording EVPs?
We'll try anything. Really, honestly, it's like my device of choice originally was actually a Sansa recorder or a Sansa player.
Just a regular recorder?
Yeah, and it was a really old one, one of the little tiny ones that they had. And it got the best.
MP3 player.
Huh?
The Sansa was an MP3 player. It wasn't a recorder. It was an MP3 player.
Yeah, it was just an MP3 player with a recording capability. And it got some really good audio on it. In fact, that's where I got a lot of the Jackie audio that I originally caught when I first started catching Jackie, the little girl in the swimming pool with Queen Mary. And so luckily I had that one with me. And so then they stopped making them. So I went and bought another one just so I'd have it. And then that one gave out. So now we're just, kind of trying a little bit of everything. And
well, my favorite is still an Olympus BN 4100 recorder. It's an older recorder that gets just enough white noise to be able to record. I have never had a recorder that could record as many EVPs as this one. And I just got a relatively new one from a friend of mine. And, she just made me happy as could be sending me one.
I've never really tried it, but one of the things I have tried, and this is if you have an iPhone, you get, and other phones do this too, but you get software upgrades, and I've had this phone that I still have for a long time. And let's talk like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, whatever iOS system that they had on that phone before many upgrades, the recording was different and you could record things and it sounded different. But one of the things that it would do is if you were just in a room and there was a lot of ambient noise, I mean, it would actually spell words. I mean, you could be in a room and it was the craziest thing. The phones don't do that anymore. They're too clean. It's too crisp, but you could sit there and as long as there was some ambient noise in there, it would generate words, and it was just crazy at times, and especially at different places that we had been, of things that you would see. But they don't. The iPhone doesn't do that anymore with the new operating system.
Right, yeah. Right. Well, who knows what all they've got in. I mean, they're putting so much stuff in them now that I mean, you don't really know if you're picking up something, from somewhere else or whatever, and one thing I always kind of laughed at was, when people say, like skeptics, like one of their favorite things to say about EVPs is, oh, they're just picking up, stray radio signals on their audio recorder, and it's like, okay, if it's just an audio recorder, it doesn't have a receiver. How's it receiving it? It makes no sense.
Right. And I had a lady, her name's Jackie Klebe. She was on the show, and she is one of those people who basically attracts a crowd, and I'm not talking living crowd. She can be anywhere, and any recording device, anytime, and it's there. And so how do you explain that one?
Yeah.
You don't. You don't. It's just she's just got the gift, you
Right.
know. I mean, or whatever you want, however you want to put it, you know. And that's kind of how I am. But I'm more like I have better results with them just talking verbally to me, audibly, and generally, if there's people with me, they'll hear it as well. So it makes it a lot easier, for evidence review because if you heard it when you were recording it, then you kind of know where to go back and listen and see if you actually did catch something or if you're imagining it. But I mean, I've been in the pool of the Queen Mary where there's probably 30 people that have heard audible, talking of Jackie or Sarah or whoever.
So, Bob, you had said that we were texting earlier in the week, and that you said to me that you can have two-way conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
he's
Brian's
really good
been
at
there.
describe that and what that's like.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time that happened, well, the first time it happened was very interesting because it was at the 2006 Ghost Fest, I believe it was, or Ghost and was it Ghost Fest or Ghost Fest, I believe, the one with the last one Peter James was at, and
that was Ghost Fest.
yeah, and so I saw Peter sitting there with a lady, and I walked up and I introduced myself, and I had my little girl with me at the time, and she's about 5 or 6. I think she's about 6, and she'd never had anything happen because she'd never been to anything like that with me. And so I kept talking to Peter, and I was asking him, a lot of questions, and he was very obliging, very kind, and so I said, well, how do you call Jackie out? How do you get spirits to come out and talk to you? And he, just very matter of factly told me, all you do is this, and this. And I go, oh, well, we're getting ready to go in the pool in just about 5 minutes. And so I'll give it a try. And sure enough, we all went in. There was like 35, 40 people in there. It was noisy as heck. But I called out really loud to Jackie, and in a nice voice. But I called out, Jackie, can you hear me? Are you there? And as soon as I yelled that out, she answered right back. She goes, hello, like that. And
What do you mean? What do you mean answered?
She audibly answered.
So everybody could hear that.
Yeah, well, not everybody, because most of them were so much, so busy talking,
right?
Just nonsense about whatever, they wouldn't have heard it. But the people that were right next to me, they all heard it, and in fact, you can hear them. I still got the original audio, and you can hear other people call out to her, and she would even answer them. She answered my daughter. So that was the first time I spoke to Jackie, and Jackie's spoke to me virtually every time I go back. I mean, every once in a while she may not be there, but or she may just not feel like talking. I don't know, but generally she's very obliging, and the other spirits are as well. And so Brian was there when we caught a 17-minute long conversation of Jackie, Brian, and I talking back and forth with each other, having a conversation, and she was answering. You'd ask her questions.
It was quite interesting.
Wait, what was that?
No, I was saying that was just really interesting. I was kind of still very skeptical at the time, so I'm hearing this little girl, and Bob's talking to her, and I'm literally running around the pool trying to figure out where this little girl is hiding, because you could hear. It was like having a conversation with a little girl.
It wasn't quiet. It's loud.
Yeah, it wasn't quiet at all. And I was convinced that there was a little girl hiding somewhere, but it was Jackie.
Yeah, and I kept telling him, I'm like, Brian, I've been talking to her. By this time, I think it was 2009, so I'd been talking to her since 2006. So I already knew, her voice. And once you hear her voice, maybe twice, at the very most, you'll never forget it. You'll
Yeah,
always
it's
know
really sick.
that's her. You know.
So Bob, at any time in your life, when you started experiencing this, did it just scare the living hell out of you and you got over it, or how does that happen? Because to me, that seems like a really intimidating thing to happen to a human being.
That's a really interesting question, and it's a good question, and it's one I really never thought about, because when you go from what happened in Alcatraz, okay, admittedly, that scared the crap out of me. But it didn't stop me from doing my research and trying to figure out what was going on. And I don't remember really being that frightened ever again after that Alcatraz incident. But every once in a while, I'd go in a place and I'd get the willies or something. But just, after it's happened so many times, and the more and more it happened, it would just continue happening more and more. So now, like, sometimes, I'll be laying there trying to sleep and they'll come up and, talk to me, and I'll just have to tell them, look, I'm trying to sleep. Please go back to wherever you're supposed to be, and they generally oblige. But, so I just kind of got to where I guess I learned to deal with it, and, how to, deal with them to where it was in a polite way. And I've never really been attacked, badly or anything like that. I've never had any super bad experiences. I've had some that were a little bit, disconcerting, but I've never been attacked at all. Like you hear Peter James even said Jackie, slapped him and burned him, and which I find, curious, because I can't imagine why, because
Bob,
Peter.
I don't think it was Jackie that was doing that. If I remember right, Peter said it was.
Yeah, it was Sarah, but I can't imagine any of them doing that to him. Really, he was just. Yeah. So, and I've never had any trouble with any of them. Although there is a male on there that does like to give me trouble once in a while, and he'll make my kidney hurt, and I can always tell it's him because he's dropped me to the floor before. And it didn't scare me, but it made me more mad, and I would tell him, you need to knock it off and just leave me alone, and he generally will. And I finally figured out, I think, who it is. So now that he knows that I know who he is, I think, then hadn't happened in a really long time. So,
do you, in a place like Alcatraz, do you ever get the sense of numbers? I mean, if you're in there, and do you ever feel like, there's 28 spirits in here, or 4 or something like that? Is it overwhelming, and can it be unnerving when you get more than one around you?
You want to answer that one first, Brian?
For me, no. I mean, I have the psychic ability of my tennis shoe. So unless I'm, hearing something on a device, for me, I can walk into a place and, it's virtually just an empty room to me. I'm starting to notice certain quirks that I have when there's possibly a spirit around. But as far as numbers, things like that, that would be Bob, because he's basically the sensitive on the team. So Bob, you should answer that one.
That's why I let you answer first, because I wanted to hear just what your thoughts were on it, because I've never heard your thoughts on it at all, and it's a great question. And I honest to gosh can't say that I've just walked into any location that, even Alcatraz, and felt like I was just surrounded or anything. In fact, Alcatraz is a very strange place for me, because at night when I'm there, I feel very calm and almost at home. It's very strange. I don't know if it's, standing there on the island and looking at the city and all the beautiful, lights and stuff, that it just kind of calms me down. But I've never been scared to walk around Alcatraz, even after what happened to me that first time. We slept in cell 14D twice. After, when we stayed overnight, that was our cell. And unfortunately for Ash, it seemed to be picking on him and not me. I hate to laugh about it, but he was getting kind of pissed at me, I think, because he felt like almost like I brought it on him or something. And he's like, "This thing's beating on me" or something. I can't even remember, but
yeah, he didn't get any sleep that one night when we were trying.
Yeah.
So the second year we were there.
Yeah, I know. He was really frustrated.
Any idea how many people have died behind the walls of Alcatraz?
Oh, if I remember right, there were only. It really wasn't that many.
Not as many as you
It
think.
was only about 14 or 15. I could be wrong on the numbers. Unfortunately, I don't have my notes with me. But there really weren't a whole lot of deaths on the island. There were mostly prisoners, of course. Then there were a few guards, but it really was not an extensive number, even though a lot of people think that it was.
But you're speaking historically, of course, and data that you can get, and of course, prior to the actual prison system being on the island, it could have been more. But what I'm wondering, let's say you had somebody there who passed away in 1850, and it was a native. And do you think that that spirit stays around forever, or does it? What does happen to it? Where do they go?
That was a question I actually was thinking about asking Brian before we ever even were anywhere near going on the air. So I'm glad you asked that. What do you think, Brian?
Where do they go?
What was the name of that Bigfoot type thing? I can't pronounce it.
That was the Matakakmi. But there was also a creature of legend that the Ohlone were afraid of, that they thought lived on the island, called a Bukwus. And it would actually try and create more Bukwus by trying to feed visitors to the island something called ghost food. And if you actually ate the ghost food, it would turn you into a Bukwus, and then you would be destined to wander the island as a Bukwus the rest of eternity. But as far as spirits, we did find, and Planet Paranormal is actually the only team that has ever investigated one of the Sally ports. And below the, I believe it's the eastern Sally port, was the original holding cell for the military. And they had a tuberculosis epidemic, and a nurse from San Francisco came over, contracted the disease. Or, I'm sorry, not tuberculosis, typhoid. And she ended up dying down there. And we actually, both years we were there, caught the same woman speaking to us in EVP. And so we were trying to figure out, now, why is there a woman talking to us in an area where there really weren't women there? And that's when we found out that it was this nurse from San Francisco. And that was back in I think 1867, if I remember, something like that.
Yeah.
So she's still hanging around.
Oh yeah, and she speaks loud and clear as well. And she actually kind of uses our one team member that it was Ash's wife, and she's no longer with the team either at this point. But she's moved on to being a mommy, and so it would actually kind of, she'd be speaking, and then this voice of this nurse would say something over Laurel's voice, and it was like, it was so much over her voice that you knew it wasn't just Laurel's voice. You could tell that it was mimicking Laurel's voice or using her energy to say whatever she was trying to say, and so it was, yeah, very clear. That was one of the things that kept us up when we got back and we're listening to the audio, the evidence is that we were getting evidence really quickly, from the beginning. As soon as we started listening, we got some really good, EVPs and that were just insane,
Having a prison out in the ocean and actually transportation costs for food and for people and sewage and electricity. The cost of maintaining an island prison like that is huge. So what were so special about the people that were on Alcatraz? Why did they even continue to pursue some sort of prison system there because of that expense? And what were so special about those people that they deserved that kind of treatment and actual expenditures by the state of California?
Well, it actually wasn't the state of California that was footing the bill for that. That was the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So it was all the money was coming from Washington. Now, in the beginning, it wasn't as expensive due to the economic times. So they figured that the people that were there, like Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, they were some of the worst hardened criminals in the country. And the island itself was considered escape-proof. That may not actually be the case, but it was one of the hardest places to escape from. So they were putting all of these, extreme criminals there with the thought that they cannot get back into society unless they had been rehabilitated. So to them, the cost was worth it. And the island literally had to have everything shipped: water, fuel, food. Literally everything had to be transported by barge to the island. So it was very expensive, and that is why the island was finally closed down in '62. Was they just couldn't justify the expense anymore.
Yeah, because the other thing was that for the guards, their kids, they had their families living out there, so their kids had to be shipped to San Francisco and go to school over in San Francisco so that nobody would know who they were, or that they had anything to do with Alcatraz. That was a big, hush hush thing. So that had to be also a massive expense to do that for them. And yeah, it just wasn't economic.
I think for a while they tried to tried to have a school there at one point in time, and for kids, which would have been majorly expensive. And then the other expense too, they had to haul trash back to the mainland, which just blows my mind. I mean, it just seems like such a huge effort. And California is ginormous. I hate to use the word giant. It's a big place. So, there's plenty of room. And if you look around now, I mean, if you drive through California on I-5 or come in from 15 from the east, I mean, there's prisons. You drive by prisons, and they seem to have plenty of room for prisons. But
whenever you see a sign that says "Do not pick up hitchhikers," there's a prison nearby.
Start looking around. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. But so when was the last prisoner let off that island? What year was that?
That was 1962.
So really a long time ago.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy closed it down, and a lot of the prisoners were shipped. They were basically shipped all around the country. Robert Stroud was shipped off to, I believe it was St. Louis, and that's where he finally ended up passing away. That's the Birdman of Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, a lot of the prisoners that were at Alcatraz were actually sorry to be shipped somewhere else. Not because things were so great. not because things were so great at Alcatraz, but it had the best food of any of the prisons within the prison system. And the food actually helped keep the prisoners a little bit more content.
Well, and also it's
So
the same food that the guards and everybody ate, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, they pretty much all ate the same thing.
Yeah. You don't hear that happening.
So at its peak, how many prisoners are we talking about? Maximum?
I believe over the life of the federal prison, there were only about 1,700 altogether, and that's from when it opened till when it closed in 1962. So there really weren't a lot of prisoners that were at Alcatraz. A lot of people think that it was a lot more, but it really wasn't. It was very. You had to be really. Alcatraz was the prison system's prison for other prisoners. So if you did something bad, you were sent to Alcatraz. If you were, like Alvin Karpus, some people know him as Creepy Karpus. He was shipped there because he was public enemy number one. So you had to be really bad to go to Alcatraz. Like, did you ever see the movie Birdman of Alcatraz?
Yeah. I've seen them all. Love it.
Robert Stroud was not like that. He was one of the meanest SOBs you would ever come across. But for some odd reason in the movie, they have him as this kind, misunderstood prisoner. He was anything but. He was one of the most vicious people to ever be in Alcatraz.
Yeah, the other prisoners were afraid of him. So, I mean, nobody wanted anything to do with him, and they kept him completely separate from everybody else. So he was up in like the, what was it, the infirmary? He had like a special cell room, whatever that.
Yeah, that was when he was. He spent his time in D block, which is the whole not necessarily solitary, but D block was the maximum security ward of. And then Stroud ended up getting sick, so they put him up in the isolation wards, the medical wards. And he was there for like 11 years. And a lot of people don't know, but he never had birds while on Alcatraz. So, he has this moniker as the Birdman of Alcatraz, but never had birds.
So birds. What other prison was it he was at that he had birds at?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was the first prison that he was in, and I cannot for the life of me remember which one it was. It wasn't Leavenworth, but he actually wrote 2 ornithology books that even today bird enthusiasts classify as some of the best ornithological books ever written, which is bizarre.
Well, I would think as far as prison goes that Alcatraz probably attracted more birds than most. I mean, what an ideal place for wildlife.
That was one of the hard things about recording audio. There was all the birds. I mean, if it's the time of year where they're mating, or having their babies, forget it, man. It is so loud. It's just, I mean, nothing but seagulls everywhere. So it's like very frustrating.
And the is now actually a bird sanctuary.
Yep.
So
yeah.
And it looks it. You get my meaning.
Yeah. So you had mentioned both of you that there's some things in Alcatraz that normal tourists don't get to see. Dungeons, things like that. Describe some of those, and what's it like down below what we see from the outside of Alcatraz.
Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. My voice is
well, the building that you see now was built over the original military citadel. So what is now classified as the dungeons is the basement of the original citadel. So you go down there, and it's just this maze of semicircular passageways. And they had originally used that as the isolation wards. And the reason it became known as the dungeons was because they literally would all but torture the prisoners that were put down there. They would give them what they called the water treatment. And, I mean, it was freezing down there. They would strip them down naked and then pour buckets of ice water on them and then just walk away. So you did have a few prisoners go crazy down there. And it finally ended up getting shut down in the early 40s. And that's when they created the what we now know as D Block. But what you see today is actually the second prison building built.
It's like if you're standing, like on D Block, and you're just like standing, walking along the sidewalk there, kind of close to cell 14D, but a little bit, I don't know, maybe 20 feet back or more, you'll see like these two big metal doors that are just like grates that are flat, and you don't even really notice them if you're not looking or if you don't know they're there. And if you open them up, then those are the stairs that go down into the dungeons and stuff. That's one way down. And then, or you can go, there's a few ways down. And then the ones that he's talking about, you have to go, what is it, up through the sally port, the gun port, and around, and that's how you get to those, right? The really rounded dungeons.
Yeah, through A Block.
Yeah. Oh, through A Block. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and if you said you have the book, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you'll see, like, if you look on page, 119, there's a really good example of what the whole thing looks like underneath there, and it's just a maze, and yeah, not a good place at all.
So according to so this is Wikipedia, but I was reading it yesterday. During its 29 years of operation, they claim that nobody successfully escaped. So what do they mean by successful? What's a successful escape from? Well, I know what a successful escape from Alcatraz would be, but what are the failed attempts? What do they look like?
Oh my Lord.
They look like that news clip they showed of the great white shark jumping up with the seal in its mouth right where you get off the boat to go on to Alcatraz. I guess. I don't know. Did you see that on the news a while back?
I didn't.
You didn't? Oh, my God. It was right there, literally like 15 feet from the dock. And this great white shark, this huge one, just comes up out of the water, completely breaches with a seal in his mouth, right as everybody's getting off the boat. And they're freaking, man, because, all these years people have been saying, no, that's just a story they tell to keep the prisoners in line. There's not really any sharks in the bay, but there actually are. So, and that was proof of it. But yeah, so.
So there were actually quite a few of the prisoners that drowned trying to get off of the island. But the most famous escape is the
Anglin.
I'm mental block on the names right now.
The Anglin brothers, and I can't remember the other.
Thank you. And Morris and the Anglin brothers, which was portrayed in the movie with Clint Eastwood, Escape from Alcatraz. Now, Morris was a certified genius. If you actually read how they went about getting off of the island, most of that came from Morris. Now, because of the Freedom of Information Act, it recently came to light that they most likely did escape. So, make of it what you will. I personally believe that they did get away. There's just too much evidence to show that they did. But a majority of the prisoners who tried were found dead, basically. Now, there was one prisoner, but his name right now escapes me, who they thought was dead, and then they found his body washed up on the rocks outside of the Presidio. So the guards at the Presidio called Alcatraz. Alcatraz sent their recovery team, and they actually found out that he was still alive. So they brought him back to the island, and he survived. So now, do we classify that as a successful escape attempt or not? Because he did live.
Yeah, but he didn't really escape either. He escaped for a period of time.
But he did make it to the mainland.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's you mean the Presidio? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah,
thought you were talking. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
no,
That's
he-
a little further than the shortest distance, which is I think only a mile and a half. But I think the Presidio is a little further.
I guess that's a successful one. I don't know. This is as close as it's going to
Yeah,
get.
that was that in '62. The guy's name was John Paul Scott, I think.
no, actually, I think it was 61, if I remember right. Like I said, unfortunately, it escapes me right now.
You know, there's a community of swimmers, and you see them. And of course, there's a triathlon they do, which they swim there. But you know, to swim in that water, you know, on a regular basis, to me, that's just seems.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a master diver, a dive master, and I've got almost every rating there is, and you wouldn't catch me swimming out there on the surface, not for the life of you.
Well, not only is it a great location in proximity to San Francisco, but the water out there is it's crazy, and when you take that 1.5 mile boat ride out there, it seems like it's so much longer. I've never, maybe in the 4 times I've been out there,
right.
I've never been out there where the water was calm. I mean, water's coming over the side, and there's spray of the ocean all over you, and it's windy, windy
People get
place.
Seasick, and
yeah, it's a windy place too. So
it is.
It's just a great place to have a prison.
Yeah, I always said that, San Francisco is like the coldest place you'll ever want to go in the summer, It's just, I've been there in the summertime, in the middle of summer, and at night you're just freezing, unbelievably freezing. And, it's just kind of strange, how it can get that cold.
Are you familiar with Samuel Clemens' quote, Mark Twain's quote?
No.
The winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Yeah,
I'll agree with him on it.
Yeah.
There's a I think written in 1902 is a book that I really love. It's called the Miranda the Lady Letty, written by a guy named Frank Norris, who was a writer back then in San Francisco in the early 1900s, and described San Francisco really, really well. And it makes it out to be the character in there gets shanghaied, and he's on a boat run by Chinese, and ends up spending 5 years on the boat working, as a slave for the Chinese. And it's kind of a high society guy from San Francisco, but the history of the city itself is totally amazing. And I think that, for visitors there, it's probably one of the to-do places in the United States. There's more to do in San Francisco than most cities that I've ever been to in the United States.
Especially in that small of an area, really.
Yeah, 7 by whatever miles. It's not a big area. So,
I would have to agree.
So talk about I want to hear about you guys really quick, about your website, and, what's your focus, and where are we going to see you in the next year or two, and what plans do you have?
Well, we are in the middle of, reworking things, and we're going to go over and try to, completely redo all the websites, redesign them, make them more interactive, get a lot more new shows up, and on the radio site, just really rework everything and try to add a lot of things that, because there's just not a whole lot to do. Like, say, on the radio site, you go on, you listen to podcasts, or that's about it. Or you can see, the store or whatever. But we want to make it where, there's a lot of other things on there, and I really don't want to say much more right now about it. But just other things that people can do, and where they can get maybe live feedback from experts or so-called experts, as expert as you can get.
What about tours and things like that? Have you
Absolutely, that's something else we're working on. We're working on doing like lecture series, and educational things like that. We also do speak at universities every year. So that's always fun to speak to people that, when you walk in and you ask how many of you believe in the paranormal, the first time I ever asked that, I expected almost every hand to go, not go up, but it was like almost every hand did go up. It was only just a few that didn't believe. And, it's been that way ever since. Every time we ask that, almost everybody believes, except with the exception of maybe, 1 to 4. So it's really cool to get their perspective on, what we do, what they think about, the paranormal, what their questions are. And it's fun teaching, and trying to give them a good solid footing to head out with, as opposed to what they see on TV necessarily.
It's a changed world. And one of the things that I really noticed, being interested in music, and I used to want to record and write music, and like between 2000 and 2005, you could go on to like Musician's Friend and buy a recorder, and super expensive. And then around 2005, when cell phones started getting huge and you could do everything with your cell phone, nobody bought a watch, nobody bought a recorder. And you could take these same recorders that were on Musician's Friend or the Guitar Center or anywhere, and they were instead of like $129, they were $29, or you could get 2 of them for like $50. And then all of a sudden, people are podcasting, learning about ghosts, and now they're buying these recorders, and they're back up to like $150 again. And
even worse.
So you can see that. And that's a result of that, 2 things, podcasting and paranormal. I mean, that's what you can do. And it's mostly paranormal. I mean, you don't see anybody walking around on a normal daytime activity with a recorder. No, they're in abandoned buildings and prisons and hospitals and mental institutions trying to record ghosts.
Well, one of the things that I get a kick out of is when people ask me, well, what do I need to start being a ghost hunter? What I tell them is the cheapest digital recorder you can find that still plugs into your computer. And they're like, well, cheap? I said, yeah, you want cheap, because if you have components that are too good, you're not going to get a thing. And people really start becoming amazed at the fact that I'm telling them, buy something cheap. And I mean, I've got a really expensive recorder. I have yet to catch a single EVP on it, but my cheapies, I get EVPs on. So, all this expensive equipment, I think Bob and I have just about every piece of equipment known to man to go ghost hunting with. And now we basically just take a camera, a video camera, some recorders, and a thermometer. Because we found that if you have too much equipment, you start losing the ability to use your most important equipment, which is your eyes, ears, nose, and brain.
Yeah, I've not started noticing that a lot, and I used to try out all the new stuff that was coming out, and I realized I wasn't getting as much stuff as I had normally, been used to getting. And so, and then Brian mentioned that, and I went, wait a minute, that actually makes some sense. And so I toned it down to my recorder and a flashlight and maybe a camera, and that was it. And I would just walk around and just, ask questions and, look
So,
around.
who do you see out there on TV or listen to on podcasts that, as far as ghost hunting, that you really respect and you have good things to say and you think that they're doing it right and you could possibly
John
emulate
Zaffis.
them? Who is it?
Yeah, John Zaffis,
John,
Chris Fleming.
that's the only mention.
Huh?
Nobody else. Johnny's the only one I'm going to mention.
Well, I'll say Chris as well.
Oh yeah, no, Chris. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's bad on my part.
I was like,
Yeah.
what? I didn't think you heard that. Yeah, Chris Fleming, I think, but he's got a different technique altogether because he's got, a gift that most people don't have, or a lot of people don't have, to at least to that extent.
John Zaffis has been doing it a long time. I mean, I don't really know of many people who've been doing it that long.
No, and John is, he is real down to earth, and he'll tell you straight up what it is. And he's even had us go and, do prelims for him on cases out on this coast, and see what our opinions are, and then send them back to him. And we told him we don't want to do that much anymore.
He said, we don't want to deal with this. So,
we got one that was a good one, and that's what really is the scary stuff, is when you get into the dark stuff. So
Yeah.
I try to stay away from that.
Yeah, we're not really into the dark stuff. So everybody else can go and battle demons all they want. We're happy with ghosts.
And I had some demonologists. I've had at least 3 on the show, and I was really surprised at their different approach and different interpretation on what's going on. I thought it would be kind of cut and dry. Everybody would be doing the same thing, but even people who consider themselves Christian demonologists and who do exorcisms even have different approaches and different opinions on what's happening and what's going on. So it's kind of amazing.
It is, and that's the thing, and the fact that you mentioned Christian demonologists, because it's like you would expect that they would kind of have like a more of a set, like say like the
standard
Catholic,
operating procedure there.
Yeah, like the Catholic exorcists. I'm pretty sure they have pretty much a standard procedure, but a lot of them don't, and you just see so many different techniques of how people go about it, and it really upsets me when I see people giving directions to people that are having problems with that, and they're giving them information that you just know is not correct, or it's not the right way to present it to them or whatever. I'm not real sure exactly how to word it, but
well, I think in many, I shouldn't say most parts, but in many cases, people are responding to the fact that there's people out there who want to know. I mean, they don't want anything wishy-washy. They want it black and white, and they want to know what's going on and what's going to happen and how this is going to turn out. And it never happens that way.
Right.
So I think that their response is geared a little in the wrong direction, and it's a bit skewed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times they'll say, this is demonic, and they'll say it too soon, like after one investigation or whatever, you've got something demonic in here, and here's what you need to do, and this and that.
It's not demonic. The ghost is just a big asshole,
Yeah, because demons, they don't want to be known. They hide as long as they can, and try to keep themselves, on the down low, making you think they're a ghost or something, or a family member, even more likely, and so, I think you need to really give it a full investigation of a period of time, and that goes for any kind of ghost hunting or paranormal research to me. You can't just walk in somebody's house and say, yeah, this is a ghost, and it's probably your dad or whatever. I mean, you might say, due to the circumstances of what you presented, in your preliminary, this is a possibility that's who it is or something to that nature. But, I'm not going to give a guarantee that's who this is or this is what's happening until I've investigated it many times, and I think Brian probably would agree with that.
Oh yeah.
So,
One of
it's dangerous when you're going in and dealing with that kind of thing, and you really haven't had somebody like John Zaffis to mentor you or and give it to you straight, and how the right way to do it is, and what to look out for and everything. And Johnny will do that. So
yeah,
he's always.
One of the reasons that we're kind of putting together a curriculum to present, most likely at one of the adult schools in our area. And one of the reasons for it is thanks to the TV shows and the fact that a lot of people don't realize that they're 99% entertainment, 1% real. People walk into a haunting case now, and they automatically assume it's a demon. And they walk in, they hear a tennis shoe squeak, and then they tell their client, oh, yeah, you got 25 million ghosts in here, and you need to get out now. And it's like, really? One of the first things that we tell prospective clients is that we are not going to be able to walk into your house and tell you anything definitive after one investigation unless things are literally flying around the room.
Right.
It may take us 2, 3, 5, 20 investigations before we can tell you anything, because ghosts are basically just dead humans. They don't act on cue. And if they know you're there to try and get rid of them, guess what? They're not going to want to come out. They're not going to want to make themselves known. So,
Right.
it can be a long, drawn-out process, and it drives both Bob and I up a wall when we see on Facebook and hear all of these other teams saying, oh, yeah, we went in and we kicked that ghost butt. And then next week they go somewhere else. We kicked that ghost butt. And we're over there going, no, you didn't. And it's just kind of like, all right, people need to start being a little bit more serious. If they want to be out there and just be ghost hunters,
professional.
that's fine. But don't go into a person's home expecting you to help them and be a pretender, because they don't need somebody going in there just there for fun. So that's one of the reasons why Bob and I have a tendency to want to try and educate people, and not necessarily to do it our way, but just to use critical thinking to be more. I hate to use the word professional because we're
Just
not
to be more precise and more. I don't know what the word is you're looking for, but it's like when you see like a TV show or something, and they go in and they're looking for demons or whatever, and they've been doing it, maybe forever on some of these shows. And if they're still running from, if they hear something and they run out of there screaming or yelling, and, they've been doing this for that many years, then there's something wrong, man. I mean, I just don't get it.
Right. Or if they're constantly getting possessed by a ghost, it's like, just
their protection is out of whack.
I don't even want to get possessed one time. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I think I'd be quitting at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I even felt like there was even a chance, then I would quit, but, so that's the thing, they if they're getting possessed every show, then they're doing something wrong. I hate to say, but I probably didn't make any friends on the TV side of things, but you know,
Well, it
we're
is what
here
it
to
is.
help. We're here to help people and to do it right and not, you know, just get our, you know, kicks out of it or whatever, you know, and so.
Yeah, what drives me up a wall is you'll see on Facebook, we have a home case this weekend, and you see all of the comments below going, "Oh, have fun! Oh, I hope you have a ball." And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, if I ever put that up, I want you to say, "I hope you can help them, not go have fun."
Right.
It's
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and
Because
that's changed too because of the sheer volume. You know, never 2 years ago, never would I have thought that you could, you know, go on Facebook and see 600. Well, not even. If I say 600, that number's low because every state now has, you know,
I know.
that many times over. It's amazing though.
Oh
It's
yeah.
incredible. And they all have shirts.
Yeah, we got shirts. You know, there's nothing wrong with shirts. You know,
No,
but
there's nothing wrong. But
you know,
you know when they're 17 in this group, you know, and I think
yeah.
I like the low impact. I like a couple of guys, maybe one, maybe two, you know, and yeah, you can have shirts, but
Well, even at our highest number for Planet Paranormal, it was 4. There were no more than 4 of us. So
Well,
yeah,
when we were actually investigating, I mean, we had when I first took over the company, there was a lot more, but slowly but surely they went by the wayside, you know, and then we kept it at 4 because it was 4, and we were family, and you know, we just clicked, and you know, to get that back is really hard, you know. So now Brian and I are having to, you know, basically. You know, be the two that click, you know, and we're looking, you know, we try out other people that, you know, do have abilities and stuff that, you know, and try different things, but it's hard to find people that you just automatically mesh with and, you know, it's a good fit, you know, and I miss that.
yeah,
But
especially
we do have people that we trust enough to bring in on investigations when we need them.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's very rarely just going to an investigation. We do, like I said, have other people that we trust, and we bring them in to help out and things like that. So, you know, we have a good rapport with a lot of people. It's just a matter of finding those other 2 that mesh like we need it, if that makes sense.
It's hard to find the other 2 that mesh just like the original Planet Paranormal 4 meshed, but we do have other people that we mesh with really well, you know, but they maybe have different skill sets or whatever, you know, or different gifts that, you know, for one case we may take these 2 people extra with us, and then for another case we may take another 2 people that have that skill set we need, you know, and so that's kind of where we're at now, you know. But we're always looking for, you know, somebody that feels like family. You'll know them when you feel it, you know, when you walk up to them, I should say, you know, you'll feel it, you know.
Do me a favor. I want you to talk about just really quick before we go, what people can find online to read that you guys have put together, because you do have some pretty dynamite stuff, and I want you to talk about your books.
Yeah, if you just you want to go ahead, Brian.
Well, we have 7 books out right now. That is Ghost of the Queen Mary, which is by far our #1 seller. And if you ever want to know the history and haunts of the Queen Mary, yeah, we're kind of biased, but that is the book to get, Ghost of the Queen Mary. We have Haunted Universal Studios, which is kind of, people get really surprised to find out that Universal Studios is haunted. And, you know, it has a good history and haunt for Universal Studios. We have Ghost and Legends of Alcatraz, of course. Haunted San Pedro. A lot of people won't understand that, but that's the LA Harbor area. Hollywood Obscura, which is 11 of the more famous murders and possible murders in Hollywood history that all have a paranormal connection. we have the only official biography of Frank Sumption, the creator of the Ghost Box. That was written by Bob and I in conjunction with Frank's best friend and wife. California's Historic Haunts, which is 25 locations from San Diego to the San Francisco Bay Area, all of which are accessible to anybody that wants to go, can have their own paranormal experience. We have our Ghosts and Legends of Calico will be out at the end of September. It just went to the publisher, and that's about the haunts of Calico Ghost Town. So we're pretty busy, and then we're working on 3 separate books that and I have to mention this. Bob is an incredible artist. He finally started drawing again, thank God. But we're coming out with 3 different books. The working titles right now are the world's creepiest destinations, or the world's most haunted destinations, America's most haunted destinations, and the world's creepiest critters, or something to that effect.
Like that.
And, yeah, but you guys have to see this. All of the drawings are Bob's, and they're absolutely fantastic.
Actually, on the world's most creepiest creatures, or whatever it turns out that we get it titled as, those drawings are going to be from a friend of mine his name's Carl Dahmer. He's an extremely talented artist himself, and he does that kind of stuff really well. And so I brought in Carl for that one. So that's should be interesting. We wanted to, on those 3 books, wanted to kind of make them more like the old-fashioned books that you got when you were a kid, and they before they had photographs and stuff, and so everything is hand drawn and
cool.
And some really creepy stories and stuff like that. So
and those are going to be a little different than what we normally write, because we're going to try and make them a little bit scarier than how we normally do it. So hopefully that'll work out well.
Excellent. Looking forward to seeing those online, and keep us up to date, and we'll post them on the website and on Facebook. Brian Clune and Bob Davis are the co-founders of Planet Paranormal Radio and Planet Paranormal Investigations. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's parainvestigations.com.
Don't forget the website. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, man.
I said queenmaryshadows.com as well.
Absolutely.
There's some websites there. Thank you so much, boys.
Thank you for having us. We enjoyed it.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.